Good evening, everyone. If you could please stand if you'd like to for the reading of the Council Prayer and the Acknowledgement of Country, and I'll call upon Councillor Stavrou to read the Council Prayer.
Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this Council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the City of Boroondara. Amen.
Thank you. And I'll now call upon Councillor Franco to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Please be seated. So welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Could I ask that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent? Thank you. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website, so you'll be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting's also being recorded and will be made available on the council website soon after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered during the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, or if needed, the meeting will be postponed. My name is Councillor Jane Addis, Mayor of the City of Boroondara, and I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. So seated to my left at the horseshoe table in the council chamber, we have Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Councillor Wes Galt, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and then on the other side from me, Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Susan Bigger, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Di Gillies and Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth. Officers in attendance tonight, Philip Storer, our Chief Executive Officer, Nick Lund, Acting Director Community Support, Daniel Freer, Director Places and Spaces, Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer, Mance Bassi, Director Customer and Transformation, Scott Walker, Director Urban Living, Brian Wee, Manager Governance and Legal, and Elizabeth Manu, Senior Governance Officer. And there are also other officers in attendance this evening, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. Our first item is apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no apologies this evening.
Thank you. Adoption and confirmation of the minutes held on 25 May 2022, 30 May 2022 and 6 June 2022. Is anyone prepared to move the minutes? Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Stavrou and Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you. Is anyone opposed to that? I presume you don't want to speak to that, so all those in favour? Thank you. I'll declare that carried. Declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Are there any declarations of conflict to be declared? No, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes. Sorry, didn't see you.
In general business, I will have
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll note that when we get to general business. Item 3, deputations, presentations, petitions and public submissions. 3.1 is petitions. Mr. Wee, you're going to introduce that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is one petition in relation to the construction of, or abandoning the construction of a bicycle path in the King Street Chain Reserve.
Thank you very much. and I believe people have seen that in the papers. Councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion? Councillor Sinfield?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder to accept that? Councillor Thompson?
Happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to that? Thank you. So there's no one opposed, so I'll declare that carried. So our next item is public submissions. And we have two people who have informed Council they wish to speak in support of their written submissions regarding item 7.1, Glenferrie Hawthorn Shopping and Business Centre Marketing and Business Development Fund. And before calling on the people to make their verbal submissions, could I just bring to everyone's attention just a couple of matters? And they are that when making a submission, we request speakers to present their viewpoints as clearly and concisely as they possibly can. To remind people that there's a 3-minute limit for each speaker, and also that after people have spoken, if they could please wait to see if any councillors have questions. So the following people have requested to be heard in support of their written submissions, 2 of them, and I'd now like to invite Mr. Leon Pesamenti forward to the front of the table here.
Hi, my name is Leon Pesamenti. I've got a business in Glenferrie Road. I've been around for a little while, and I'd like to make comments on the levy that's been proposed. Whilst I like the levy, I don't like the way it's managed. I think there is a deep misfunction of the committee that could be put right by some council involvement so that a representative from the council could be at each of our meetings, as it was many, many years ago. Because you've got to understand that people on the committee have no experience, including myself, of committees, how they run, what responsibilities they have, and what rights they have. So if they were educated in this area, there'd be less corruption in the way the committee is run. I'm not going to say anything more than that, right? I hope that something like that could eventuate. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Pesamenti. I can't see any lights on for questions, so if you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you. Thanks for your submission. And our next speaker is Mr. Lucas Hipkins on behalf of Dr. Neville Lee C. Thank you, Mr. Hipkins.
Hi, my name's Lucas. I'd like to start by objecting to the fact that he thinks we're corrupt. His wife is also on the committee. Just thought I should make that clear. My name's Lucas. I've got a business on Glenferrie Road. I've been there for 20 years. I've been on the committee for about the last 10 years. I'd like to start by saying that the special rating scheme is strongly supported by the traders of Glenferrie Road, and as we move through this COVID-19 pandemic, I believe that the Glenferrie Traders Association is needed more now than ever before. We conducted a survey at the end of last year, and over 90% of the respondents found that the assistance provided by the Traders Association was invaluable, and it was their go-to source for information about the pandemic, helping them with things like navigating the lockdowns, what requirements were needed for trading, as well as how to get different grants and support for different businesses. The GTA at the moment has 15 active members, which is the largest committee that we've had in over 10 years. The GTA relies on the special rate and charge scheme to assist us with running major events and promotions throughout Glenferrie Road, including our flagship event, the Glenferrie Road Festival, which on average brings in about 80,000 people annually, with about a 75% participation rate from the local traders and an economic impact of about $3.2 million annually. We also have a number of other events like Christmas markets and Christmas activations, Mother's Day and Father's Day promotions. We do Halloween. We have a website which is a great source of what's happening on the street, as well as information on all the businesses, with an average of about 50 different events listed per month, and we get about 10,000 visits to that website each month. We're also very active on social media, both Facebook and Instagram. Looking to the future, the 23 to 27 special rate and charge period, we intend to deliver even more events and promotions, with 3 new major events scheduled for this year, starting with Light Up Glenferrie next month after the tramworks finish. That's going to be 3 nights of illuminations and entertainment on the street, with a projected 10,000 visitors and an economic impact of about 200,000 for that event. Further in the year, we're doing a Wellbeing Expo in August, and we're doing a comedy festival in October, which will consist of about 65 shows over 9 different venues within the precinct. And we're hoping to get about 8,000 people turn up, with an economic impact of about $1 million for that event. As a retail store,
Can I get you to wind up in about
Absolutely.
30 seconds?
Yeah. Over the last 2 years, I've seen a huge increase in online sales through my business, but a big dip in in-store retail sales. I believe that now, more than ever, we need to try and get customers back onto the street and back into the retail stores. And I don't have a silver bullet for that, but I believe that the events and the promotions that the Traders Association run is a good step in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can't see any lights on, so if you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you, Mr. Hipkins. So that concludes our submissions. So our next item is item 4, informal meeting of councillors. And councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the record of informal meetings of councillors is printed in our business papers? Councillor Thompson?
Happy to move as such.
And seconded, Councillor Sinfield? Thank you. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Thank you. So look, I'll declare it carried. Thank you. Our next item is public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 4 questions with notice from 2 members of the community.
Thank you very much. I'll just turn to them. So our first 2 questions are from Montserrat Pesamenti of Hawthorn, and they relate to the special rate and charge for the Glenferrie Hawthorn area. Now, we've had to disallow the question because we actually couldn't see any question contained. We've disallowed it because there actually isn't a question there that we can see. And likewise for the second question from Mr. Montserrat Pesamenti, and again on the special rate and charge for the Glenferrie Hawthorn area, again, there wasn't a discernible question there. So thank you. I don't think we can send a written reply to not being able to see a question, but thank you. Our next question is from Ian Huntley of Balwyn North. Is Mr. Huntley? Yes, thank you. Now here's the first question. Is the growth of future cyclist numbers in Boroondara predicted by Council to be modest, as noted in the answer provided to my question at the Council meeting on June 6, 2022, or anticipated to be much more substantial as reflected in Council's representations to the North East Link Project, NELP, and endorsed at the Services Delegated Committee meeting on 20 June 2022, which seeks higher capacity cycling infrastructure from NELP in the light of a persisting cycling boom in the wake of the COVID pandemic. So thank you for the question, Mr Huntley, and it's been allowed because it's previously been put in writing to a councillor or council officer more than 10 days before the question, at which it's now submitted. So I'll call on Director of Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to this question from Mr Huntley. Thanks,
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Freer.
Mayor, and through you. The response provided at the council meeting on June the 6th was given in relation to the existing unsealed paths through Hayes Paddock and nearby parks, including Stradbroke Park and Myrtle Macleay Parks. To clarify, the growth in cyclist numbers along the existing unsealed paths through these parks due to the proposed maintenance and renewal works is anticipated to be modest. Council's interest in the Coonung Creek Trail, which is part of the state government's strategic cycling corridor and is identified as a primary route, is a related but separate matter. Council has sought to ensure that this long-established link is replaced appropriately, given its role in the network for commuter cyclists from the Melbourne CB to the eastern suburbs and beyond.
Thank you, Mr Freer. And Mr Huntley, you will receive a written response to your question. We have another question from Mr Ian Huntley, which relates to bicycle networks. The question is, with the apparent abandonment of a proposal to construct a cycleway through Greythorn Park, will Council now undertake to not construct an extended cycleway through other parks in North Balwyn, including Jacker Reserve, Gordon Barnard Reserve, Hislop Park, Macleay and Myrtle Parks? And again, thank you, Mr Huntley, and the question is allowed under Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules as it has previously been put in writing more than 10 days before this meeting, which it's submitted at. And again, Mr Freer, Director of Places and Spaces, I believe will respond.
Thank you again through you, Madam Mayor. The draft bicycle strategy has not proposed a new cycleway in recreational parklands across Kew and Balwyn. Rather, the proposals involve formalising unmade goat tracks with unsealed gravel surfaces, similar to the existing gravel paths in these areas, and maintenance of the existing gravel paths. In terms of the unmade tracks in Hayes Paddock and Stradbroke Park, an additional section of the north end of Hayes Park, approximately 140 metres, and the other side of High Street and Stradbroke Park for approximately 160 metres is shown in the draft strategy. Implementation of the actions will be subject to an adoption of the strategy, further localised consultation and budget provision.
Thank you, Mr Freer. And Mr Huntley, again, you will receive a written response as well. So our next item is notices of motion. Mr Wee, do we have any notices of motion?
Madam Mayor, through you, we have no notices of motion this evening.
Thank you. We're now going to move to presentation of officer reports. Can I just check if anyone has an issue with the order? There is a possibility to move 7.1 and 7.6 on block. So 7.1 is the April monthly financial report and 7.6 the adoption of the asset plan. I'll pause. Does anyone have a view on that? Councillor Thompson?
I'm happy to move on block the suggested items.
Those two items. And seconded, Councillor Biggett?
Yeah, happy to second that, thank you.
Can I just check if anyone's opposed to that? Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to that motion to move the two en bloc.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The two items, which are the financial report under 7.1 and 7.6, the adoption of the Asset Plan 2022. For the benefit of our gallery, councillors have read through these reports and questions have been asked of officers, and they're fairly administrative in their approach. I'm happy that these are put forward, these to be adopted en bloc so that we can move on to more substantive parts of the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and as no one was opposed, I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move to item 7.2, which is adoption of Amendment C 353 Borrandara Part 2, Kew Individual Heritage Properties. And that's going to be presented by Nick Brennan, Senior Strategic Planner. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Amendment C353 Part 2 gives effect to the Urban Planning Special Committee resolution of the 20th of July 2020. The amendment completes outstanding recommendations by the independent panel for Amendment C294 to the Burundara Planning Scheme, which implemented the Kew Heritage Gap Study. The amendment proposes to include the properties at 26 Goldthorns Avenue and 97 Argyle Road, Kew, in the Heritage Overlay as individual significant places. Amendment C353 was exhibited from the 22nd of July to the 27th of August 2021. 3 submissions were received. At the UPDC meeting of the 8th of November 2021, the UPDC resolved to split the amendment into 2 parts and to refer objecting submissions and relevant properties to an independent planning panel for consideration. The panel's report and recommendations were received on the 9th of March 2022 and were considered by the UPDC on the 2nd of May 2022. The panel supported Council's recommendations that 26 Goldthorns Avenue and 97 Argyle Road, Kew be included in the Heritage Overlay, subject to some changes to the heritage citations to include additional information about the properties. The UPDC resolved to accept the recommendations of the panel and to refer Amendment C353 Part 2 to an ordinary meeting of Council to be adopted. Officers are recommending that the Council resolve to adopt Amendment C353 Part 2 as shown in attachments 1 to 4 and to submit the amendment to the Minister for Planning for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Brennan. Are there any questions? I think Councillor Sinfield, you've got your light on. No, not a question.
No question, just ready to move a motion when the time is right.
Now, does anyone else have a question? I can't see any other lights. So, Councillor Sinfield, your motion?
Thank you. The officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you very much. So, for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that? Thank you. So I'll return to the mover, Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I don't think too much needs to be said about this, really. It's quite procedural, but of course I'm delighted that these properties will be protected for future generations and thank the officers for bringing this to us. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hollingsworth, as it's not opposed, are you happy?
I echo Councillor Sinfield's words.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr Brennan. So item 7.3, Kew Junctions Shopping and Business Centre Marketing and Business Development Fund. And I believe that's going to be presented by Lucinda Bakash, Local Economies Lead. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. The report before you tonight is for Council to consider submissions and objections received following public notice of Council's intention to declare a special rate and charge for a marketing and business development fund for the Kew Junction Shopping and Business Centre and to determine whether to declare the proposed scheme. By way of a summary, the outcome of the public consultation resulted in receipt of 6 submissions in respect of 6 properties objecting to the scheme. Of these 6 submissions, council officers considered 4 were valid objections with respect to a total of 4 properties. This equates to 0.7% of the 577 rateable properties in the proposed scheme. I confirm that of these submissions received, no one has registered to be heard this evening. However, I would like to acknowledge that Mr. Con Barbaranis, President of the Kew Junction Business Association, is in attendance this evening to show his support of the proposed scheme. In closing, because objections were received in respect of fewer than 50% of those properties to be included in the scheme, Council may resolve to declare the proposed scheme.
Thank you. Are there any questions for officers? Councillor Stavro?
No questions, but a motion when it's appropriate, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I just had one question, if you don't mind. It talked about removing 427 High Street Kew. That's taken as removed. It doesn't need to be reflected in a motion.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. By virtue of the fact that the property is deemed by the property and rating process as a residential property and not a commercial premises, it is automatically exempted from the scheme.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I can't see any other lights on, so Councillor Stavry, your motion?
The officer's recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And I can see Councillor Sinfield's lights on. You happy to second? Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is nobody's opposed? Thank you. So I'll return to you, Councillor Stavry, to speak to the motion.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, let me acknowledge Mr. Konbabayanis for being here today and supporting the motion, President of the Kew Junction Business Association. As you know, this scheme has been in place in the Kew Junction for 24 years and since 1998, and further renewal has been initiated by the Kew Junction Business Association and sought council support to facilitate the continuation. The low level of objections indicate how well this scheme is received, and as we know, schemes such as these support council to deliver the Boroondara Community Plan, where the local economy is one of the major key themes. It assists business associations to run voluntarily group activities and committed business owners to deliver on these schemes. It provides strong and cohesive brand management, which is very, very important, supports business capacity and building, including supporting business resilience, crucial in the after-COVID period. So in all, I would recommend that the renewal of this scheme by council, based on the benefits it delivers and the low level of trader objections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there was no one opposed to this. You're happy not to speak as the seconder?
In your hands.
If you'd like to, you're most welcome to say a word.
Thank you. I'll just echo Councillor Stavry's comments and also just note that in the time that I've been on council, which is now 6 years, the Kew Junction Business Association has just gone from strength to strength, and their success reaches far beyond the precinct of the Kew Junction itself. So I'd just like to acknowledge their brilliant marketing and business strategies that have been executed over the last 6 years that I think really has strengthened what Kew more broadly and local shopping offers our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Stavry, I'm assuming you don't want to say any more. Thank you very much. So we'll now put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So we'll now go to 7.4, which is Glenfrey Hawthorn Shopping and Business Centre Marketing and Business Development Fund. And again, that's going to be presented by Lucinda Backash, Local Economies Lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report before you tonight is again for Council to consider submissions and objections received following public notice of Council's intention to declare a special rate and charge for a marketing and business development fund for the Glenferrie Hawthorn Shopping and Business Centre and to determine whether to declare the proposed scheme. I wish to acknowledge and thank Mr Leon Pesamenti and Mr Lucas Hipkins, who has spoken on behalf of Mr Neville Lee C, the President of Glenferrie Road Shopping Centre Association, for their submissions this evening. By way of a summary, the outcome of the public consultation for Glenferrie Hawthorn resulted in receipt of 16 submissions in respect of 16 properties. The valid objections equate to 2.8% of the 555 rateable properties in the proposed scheme. I'd also like to take this opportunity to respond to the matters raised by Mr Pesamenti this evening. Mr Pesamenti raised concerns regarding misfunction of the Glenferrie Hawthorn Committee and seeking representation from Council at committee meetings and assistance for committee members in relation to their rights, roles and responsibilities. Currently, Council receives agendas and minutes for committee meetings and Council officers attend the Association's AGM. Local Economies has spoken to the Pesamentis and will look at the potential to attend committee meetings more regularly. As has been undertaken previously, it is the intention of the Local Economies team to facilitate a session run independently for all 8 Burundara Business Association committee members on rights, roles and responsibilities of members and on good governance practices generally within the next couple of months. There are also resources available on the Consumer Affairs website on governance matters for incorporated associations, including office holder roles and responsibilities. In closing, because objections were received in respect of fewer than 50% of those properties to be included in the scheme, Council may resolve to declare the proposed scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Park?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I heard what you said in respect of the comments made by Mr Pesamenti. I presume that your response that we've just heard is in no way an endorsement of the comments that were made. I mean, I think, it's somewhat extraordinary for a presenter to come in and use the word corruption in an open forum like this. I think it ought to be made clear that there's certainly nothing from officers' perspective that endorses that, or that there's any suggestion from officers' observation that there's any substance to that comment.
No, I would not give that credence at all from an officer's perspective. And some of the, I guess, the strategies in response to some of those concerns that were raised were things that the Local Economies team already had in train.
Thank you. And a follow-up, I just don't recall whether there's an audit requirement or not in respect of all the Traders Association. Can you just remind me what, I know there's an acquittal process, but I don't recall if there's anything beyond that.
There's quite a comprehensive reporting regime that is underpinned by an agreement that Council has with each of the associations. There is an independently audited financial report annually that each association must provide to Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any further questions tonight, but I just a foreshadow a motion, please.
Okay. I can't see any other lights on for questions, so let's go back to you, Councillor Gold, with your motion.
It will be the officer's recommendation with one amendment.
Okay, and I'll just check that we have that and we'll get it up on the screen. So it's a little way through and it's point 3.
Correct.
And it just adds, and where requested, provide the relevant financial information for point 3. Okay. Yep. So have we, Councillor Bigger, you're happy to second?
I am, thank you very much.
Councillor Park, you've got a question?
In accordance with our procedures, can I ask what's intended by that amendment? Because it's not evident to me.
Yep. Let's go back to Councillor Gold.
Do you want me to do my whole comment now or just respond to that?
Maybe just respond to that, please.
It was added, Councillor Park, because I have had some discussions leading up to tonight, and there was a concern from Mr Pesamenti, not put in the same way as it was tonight, that he believed he hadn't seen enough financial breakdown or information. I understand the officers have much of that information to hand, and I feel very free to let Mr Pesamenti look through that financial information. So this addition to item 3 simply adds that to the motion to ensure that can happen.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask that officers consider that that's clear enough for them to action? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, you have a question for the mover?
Thank you, I do. I'm not sure if it's for the mover or for the officers without wanting to draw them into debate, but I'd just like some clarity, please, as to whether we are the owners of that information and it is up to us to disclose, or whether it is the business association that is the owner of that financial information and therefore would be up to them to disclose.
Well, I would say that the information is owned by the association. We have access to it because they provide us with that audited financial information. So I cannot see there being a problem with them accessing that via the association. However, we'd be willing to provide that also with their consent.
Thank you. So on that basis, I might ask the mover to consider whether the wording of that addition is in fact appropriate in the circumstances, because I'm not comfortable with us providing somebody else's information to a requester.
Have you got some different words you could suggest for the mover to consider?
I could suggest that it could simply be that request the GTA to provide the information in such and such a submission to Mr Pesamenti. I presume it's directed just at one, that there's not more than one?
That's correct, Councillor Park.
So we could request the Traders Association to provide it direct to him? I mean, it seems a bit circuitous given that he's on the committee, but anyway.
Let's just check. We're almost getting into debate here. Let's just check with Councillor Gold, and then I think we just need Councillor Gold to pick which he wants to.
I had asked that question beforehand, and the views I had back at that time from the officers were that Mr Pesamenti was a member of that association and therefore has a right to access that financial information. It was just a matter of us going through it with him and helping him understand it and getting access to it. I guess he could go through the association as well, but this seems one step away from it and one I feel he may be more comfortable with. That's why item 3 has been reworded in the way it has. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess you're saying you want to leave it as it is?
I would prefer to, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Biggie, you're still happy to second?
Yeah, I am. I would be a little bit uncomfortable with having a specific person named in that. It seems to me that anybody who is a member of that association, I would have thought should have a right to be able to ask for that information. I wouldn't think we'd want to specify a particular person.
Yep, we haven't named anyone. Okay, so for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to, yes, Councillor Park and possibly others? So let's go back to Councillor Gold. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd just simply like to congratulate the officers on a very detailed report. It's very thoroughly researched and put together, and there's an awful lot of information in there. I'd also like to congratulate the association on the work it's put in recent years. We've been through a very, very difficult time with COVID, etc., and major threats to retail operations from challenges online and from pandemics. And they've stepped up by having substantial new initiatives, many of which were touched on by the second speaker tonight. So I think it's an excellent report, and I strongly support what's in the recommendation, with the one exception that I put forward. But having said that, Mr. Pesamentri is a significant property owner in the area, and I don't think we can simply ignore that he has a concern, even though he only makes up a very small proportion of the association. And I think by giving him access to information that came from an association he is a member of, and helping him through that if we so need to, might allay some of his concerns about the association and thereby help him support it in some way, shape or form. So I commend the motion as modified tonight to my colleagues for support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Councillor Bigger is the seconder. Would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll just reserve my right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor, now we've got Councillor Sinfield's light on next.
Thank you. My objection is only to the addition and the wording that has been added in red text there. I feel quite strongly about the fact that it's not our information to disclose, and I would be much more comfortable if it was worded in a way to facilitate access to that information or to facilitate education around those financials or something to that effect. But I'm uncomfortable with council resolving to provide information that we don't own to a third party. So on that basis, unless there is any change, and it's not my traders association, and I don't plan to suggest an amendment at this point, but that's my objection, and I think that it puts council in a very, very difficult and awkward position, and puts officers in an awkward position that I don't seek to encourage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Park.
Thank you. Look, my objection is exactly on that basis as well. It's not, we've heard from officers, this is not council information to give. It can't be any clearer than that. That's point one. Point two, as to naming Mr. Pesamentri in the minutes, so what? He's come along and made a submission. It's all quite public. There's no privacy being breached. But there's more than one way to address that. But there isn't more than one way to address the problem that this is not council's information to give over. And this would be a very messy precedent for us to establish at this juncture. I support the rest of the recommendation. I support the officer's recommendation. But in all good conscience, I can't support the amended motion. It's just nonsensical.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Bigger, would you like to speak now?
Yes, I would. I continue to feel comfortable with this amendment, in part because the officers have not said that they had an issue with it. They didn't think it would be a problem. They didn't see it as problematic. I also, my concern about naming a specific person was just that it seems to indicate that we would only give it to that person, and I would have thought that any member of the association would have a right to it. And if officers don't see that as a problem, I don't see that as a problem. I think we're making something significant out of something it's not. I do think I would like to echo Councillor Galt's comments about the association, and just to acknowledge how difficult these last few years have clearly been and how much hard work they've done. And even thinking about the Glenferrie Festival and the sense of absolute joy at that event this year, I think, with people feeling that they were finally kind of coming out from under such a challenging time. And it's it's a difficult time even right now for the traders with the closure of the road. So it's really, I think they very much rely on the Traders Association to be a force for good and support. So I want to thank the officers for their work on this and encourage my fellow councillors to support the recommendation.
Thank you. So I can't see any other lights on, so I'll return to the mover, Councillor Gold, to conclude the debate.
Thank you. Prima facie, I can see the concerns of my colleagues that did object to it. But counter to that, I would say that I've had a couple of discussions with officers last week, and there's been plenty of time between those discussions and now. There was assurances given at that time that they felt it was information that should readily be able to be given to other association members, and we decided to generalise it, not focus it on Mr Pezzamenti in any way, shape or form, but that anyone in that association that wanted to review those figures should have the perfect right, and in fact probably could through the association. But this is just one way of ensuring that those who feel they need to, if there's any difficulties between certain parties in that association, that those persons or that person will have access to those figures. So I would strongly recommend it be left simple, the way it is in the modification to item 3, and that way we can assure that information that we believe we can readily give to members of that association is given to members of the association if they request it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll now put the motion up on the screen. All those in favour? Thank you. And those against? So that motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Bakash. Our next item is 7.5, contract number 2021/145, Food and Garden Organics Processing Services. And I believe that's going to be introduced by George Batsakis, Manager Facilities, Waste and Infrastructure. Thanks, Mr Batsakis.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. For this new contract, the City of Boroondara and the City of Stonington undertook a collaborative tender process to award to an appropriately experienced and qualified contractor the processing of food and garden organics and hard greens. Pending the decision tonight, each council would award separate contracts for this service. In working with the City of Stonington under a collaborative process for this contract, as well as 2 further recycling-related contracts due to be presented to Council in the coming months, we've achieved a beneficial financial outcome as well as efficiencies in the tendering process across both organisations. The food and garden organics processing is a strategically important service which supports Council's waste minimisation and recycling strategy and is a key service in meeting and exceeding Council's 80% diversion from landfill by 2030. FOGO processing provides circular economy outcomes and is in Council's Climate Action Plan in Theme 5, Circular Economy. This report seeks to award 1 contract for an initial period of 5 years with a possible extension of 2 years and 2 years with a possible maximum term of 9 years. This is a schedule of rates contract based on volumes where the contractor will provide processing services of food and garden organics and hard greens. The tender evaluation panel has assessed all tenders received against qualitative and quantitative criteria and is satisfied that the recommended contractor can perform the required works and demonstrate best value for money. The recommended contractor provides full circular economy outcomes with processing the material into mulch and compost, which provides end market use. As an extension of this, there will be an opportunity to work with the contractor in the future to provide material directly back to the municipality for use in the parks and gardens and in time accessible to residents. The officer's recommendation is provided in the report. I ask the Council to consider this report for adoption.
Thank you, Mr Batsakis. And Councillor Park, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm intrigued about paragraph 3. It seems to me that that's unnecessary for this motion, particularly tonight. why would we not simply award the contract, and then the issue of whether in 5 years hence it's the extensions that are to be exercised or not could be referred to council at that time?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The approach that's taken in paragraph 3 has been typical of awarding extensions of the contract. However, I do recall, I think it was a sweeping tender contract where we agreed at the council resolved at that meeting to bring the further extensions back to council for consideration at that time. So we're in your hands whether that's the approach you would prefer to take, but
I'll foreshadow a motion which would be to remove paragraph 3 and renumber paragraph 4 as number 3.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions in relation to the FOGO service. Could you, through you, Madam Chair, could you advise how far we are in the rollout of FOGO to our municipality in terms of what's remaining for the completion of the rollout? And in that respect, is there any implications in relation to this contract?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. So we're about 98% complete for all the MUD sites. The rest of the municipality, FOGO has been rolled out to. So for this service, the quantities we've provided includes the existing MUD sites, so there's no impact on completing the remaining MUD sites. Which is multi-unit developments.
That was what I was about to say. I knew what MUD, but I think a lot of people listening will wonder these MUD sites and multi-unit developments. And sorry, because I kept hearing the word MUD, the contract, multi-unit developments probably require slightly different arrangements, and I assume that's the reason that they're the remaining 2%, 1%, and this contractor can service those developments?
Correct.
And should council be of a mind to further expand FOGO in future years, for example, to small businesses or elsewhere, and I appreciate this is purely speculative, but would it be possible within the current tender package to facilitate that?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we are considering rolling out FOGO to commercial properties. The current tender would allow, through variation, those properties.
Okay, and so we can expect that to come before council at the appropriate time, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr Batsakis, for that presentation. And I note you mentioned that the City of Boroondara have a contract alignment with the City of Stonington. I just wonder if you could tell us, please, are there any ongoing implications of that, what that relationship means? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The arrangement that we have reached with the City of Stonington has really been around process opportunities and the opportunity to work together for tendering of like services where our contracts have aligned and our specifications have also aligned with similar expectations from our communities. Both organisations will award separate contracts and hold separate contracts with providers, so there is no ongoing obligation from this point.
Thank you. May I have one more question? I think it's a minor one, but could you just clarify, please, probably for the sake of our viewers more than anything else, any impacts on the waste charges in the 22-23 budget?
The report presented to you tonight is in line with the waste charge anticipated in the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Biggar next.
Yeah, mine is just a very small clarification. It really, in some ways, goes, I suppose, to Councillor Park's question, and that is in point number 1. So the full estimated cost after return GST input credit, that 30 million, that's for the full 9-year contract then, rather than the 5 years that were. So it might make sense, we would need to change that presumably if we're looking at, no, you're happy with leaving it that, even if we take that out? Okay.
Do you want to?
Yes, the amount is for the full 9 years, and that is not an obligation of the contract that we are entering, but an indication of the maximum price over that 9-year period.
So does that answer your question?
Well, I guess my question is, why would we have it in? Why would we have it in there as 9 years rather than the 5 years? And also, it doesn't really say exactly the maximum contract, does it? Because it excludes any price adjustment due to rise and fall. So, you know, it may well not be the maximum, right?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So typically our approach has been to, again, provide full transparency of the price that we anticipate over the life of the contract. There may be rise and fall across that within reasonable levels as well. If there is something that is of an excessive amount or beyond an expectation, we would bring that back to council for further resolution. But as the tendered price, this is what has been provided.
That's that as far as you, Councillor Bigger. Yep, thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, you did have your light on, but it's not now. Are you?
All my questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other lights on, so Councillor Park, you foreshadowed a motion.
Yes, so I move that motion as I foreshadowed earlier. And just to, nothing in this amendment to the officer's recommendation has any effect on paragraph 1. What is asserted there remains true, albeit that the extension may or may not be exercised, but again, the change in motion doesn't have any impact on whether it will or will not be exercised. It simply means it'll come back to council. So I move that, obviously.
Thank you, Councillor Park. And I think Councillor Sinfield's light was next. You wanted to second?
Happy to second.
Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? Councillor Gold, you're opposed?
I have... Can I speak to that now? I'll wait.
Wait, yes, thank you. So look, we'll now go back to the mover.
I'm happy for Councillor Gold to speak. I don't need to add anything at this juncture.
Councillor, and we probably should check whether the seconder wants to speak before. No. It's your turn, Councillor Gold.
Thank you very much. Look, I can understand why we would want to draw that back into the chamber, that decision, but I guess it's common practice in industry to, with contractors that work out well and are providing an excellent service, to offer the prospect of extensions of contracts to other works. And I'm very mindful at a point of time like this about the recent press articles about other councils who have found it difficult to get contractors that have use for the end material. We've gone in early and we've secured contractors, and we believe this contractor has end-use material. But I think the competition for those sorts of things may increase over the next 5 years. And I would like to think, and it doesn't mean that we have to go ahead and extend the contract. We just have the ability to do so. And I think that is a very rich thing to do in working and developing a relationship with a contractor, to have that ability. So I would prefer to leave that option in if we can.
Councillor Park, did you want to speak to your motion now? No? Councillor Sinfield.
I'd be delighted to. Interesting optics to oppose a food and garden organics processing service. I could almost leave my comments there, but alas, I won't. The removal of the third point that Councillor Park has excised from this motion does not take away the ability to extend the contract. It simply means it'll come back to the chamber where you'll get to reconsider your position on a food and garden organics processing service for our community. The contract will still have those extension options available within it. I think this is an excellent service for our community. I'm delighted to see this contract before us tonight and thank the officers for bringing it here. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Franco was next.
Thank you. I'm very supportive of the motion as presented by Councillor Park. I'm frankly a bit surprised that Councillor Galt is opposing this version. It guarantees transparency. It guarantees that the decision is brought back to the council chamber. Otherwise, the council chamber won't see the decision again for 9 years, long after we've left this council. Now, you know, in 5 years' time, the next elected council will get a chance to actually have a say. If we present the motion as you're proposing, Councillor Galt, you will not only make a decision beyond the life of the next elected council. So I just think we need to be mindful of that, and it's not in any way undermining the good work of the officers and the proposal as presented. I'm very impressed, and I'm very pleased with the rollout, and I understand the last couple of percent, the very last few properties, the multi-unit dwellings are an issue, but they're the most challenging, and I'm very supportive of what's being done in this regard, and I also look forward to the future report on possible extension. So very pleased with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm heartened to hear Councillor Franco's suggestions that there are no career councillors beyond 9 years, so that's always beneficial. And I just encourage all councillors to support this. It's not too late to put your point forward and obviously still raise your hand and support what is a very important aspect of our Climate Action Plan Committee and suggestions of greater benefits to our community as well. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. So we'll now return to the mover.
Thank you. I can't say it any better than Councillor Franco already did.
Thank you. So we'll now put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move to 7.7, because 7.6 was moved on block. 7.7 is contract number 2021/51 cleaning services, and again that's going to be presented by George Batsakis, Manager Facilities, Waste and Infrastructure.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Council requires an appropriately experienced and qualified contractor to provide internal cleansing services at various council buildings, such as municipal offices, libraries, MCH centres, depots and other buildings. The services under this contract include cleansing of offices, meeting rooms, common and wet areas, removal of rubbish and replenishment of consumables. The cleansing of these buildings is essential in protecting the health of employees, visitors and ensuring these assets are presentable. This report seeks to award one contract for an initial period of 3 years, with an extension of 2 increments of 1 year with a possible maximum term of 5 years. This is a lump sum contract where the contractor will provide scheduled cleaning services. The increase in cost from the previous contract reflects wage and material increases, additional building footprint requirements following capital renewal works and service expectations from community, particularly in libraries and MCH centres. The tender evaluation panel has assessed all tenders received against quantitative and qualitative criteria and is satisfied that the recommended contractor can perform the required works and demonstrate best value for money. The officer's recommendation is provided in the report. I ask the council to consider this report for adoption.
Thank you, Mr Batsakis. Questions for Mr Batsakis? No? Okay. Is anyone prepared to move a motion? This is like at an auction. Councillor Park.
Thank you. I mean, I'm inclined to do the same thing with this one. This is shorter and rather less money, but I don't see any reason to treat this differently. So I'll move a motion that does that, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, have you got your light on to second?
Very happy to second the amended or Councillor Park's motion.
Thank you very much. Now, is anyone opposed to this Councillor Park's new motion? Nobody dares. Yes. Councillor Park.
If it's not opposed, I don't see the need to speak to it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Thank you. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mr Batsakis. So 7.8, adoption of the budget 2022-23, and that's going to be introduced by Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. This report recommends that Council adopts the budget 2022-23 and declare the rates and charges for the 2022-23 financial year. Council resolved on the 26th of April 2022 to endorse the proposed budget for public exhibition and community consultation. 42 submissions were received, with 11 submitters heard at the Council meeting on the 6th of June. A summary of these submissions is included in the papers you have before you at attachment 4, along with officer comments. All submitters will receive a response in writing after the adoption of the budget. Attachment 2 summarises the impact of amendments made to the budgeted financial statements after the proposed budget 22-23 was received by Council at its meeting on the 26th of April. The amendments relate to the early payment of Council's 22-23 Victorian Local Government Grants Commission grant income being received in advance in the 21-22 financial year. As detailed in the report, there are 4 additional items recommended for inclusion in the budget 2022-23. 3 in response to submissions received from the community, including $115,000 for the South Oval upgrade at Victoria Park Q, $21,700 for the Hartwell Community Residence Wall, and $60,000 for security cameras at the Craig Centre. The 4th item is an additional $373,242 in relation to contract 2021/51 for cleaning services, as discussed in the report just presented to Council earlier this evening. These recommendations will add a net cost of $569,942 to the budget of 2022-23, and it's proposed that this is funded from Council's surplus result. Considering these additional items in relation to Council's long-term financial position, Council remains financially sustainable not only for the 22-23 year, but for the forward 10 years of the long-term financial plan. I'll now hand over to the Mayor, who would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms Montalti. So, good evening, everyone. I'll just say a few words and then I'll hand back to you with any questions. So I'm very pleased to present the 2022-23 budget for Council's adoption. The budget has been prepared in line with Council's commitment to sustainable budgeting, responsible financial management and the state government's rate cap for 2022-23. Council is working towards recovery following the challenges over the last couple of years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Importantly, we are also ensuring that the needs and aspirations of our diverse community are being acknowledged and responded to. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an unprecedented challenge from which Council was not exempt. Reductions in services, primarily user fees and statutory fees and charges, resulted in a budget deficit in the 2020 2021 financial year, the first in Council's history. Returning the 2022-23 budget to surplus has been our priority and is fundamental to ensure we are in a strong financial position to meet our community's priorities. The 10-year Borondara Community Plan 2021-31 provided the framework for the development of this budget to ensure we provide the things that matter most to our community. Over the 4 weeks of public exhibition on the proposed budget, we received 42 community submissions. We also heard from 11 community members who spoke to their submissions at the Council meeting on 6 June. On behalf of Council, I thank everyone who took the time to review the proposed budget and prepare a written submission. Your feedback is valued and guides us in formulating both this and future budgets. Tonight, Council will decide where funding should be allocated based on the feedback for our community plan, together with budget submissions. A total of $79 million has been committed to renewal of, as well as new, community assets in the coming year to contribute to community wellbeing. And this includes completion of the new Kew Recreation Centre in 2023, completion of the new Canterbury Community Precinct in 2023, commencement of the tuck stand refurbishment at Glenferrie Oval, and commencement of the Kew Library redevelopment. We will also continue to invest in the preservation and ongoing maintenance of parks and sports grounds, other infrastructure including buildings, footpaths and shared paths, and waste services. The pandemic brought us together and strengthened our community's resolve to support local businesses and to shop local. This budget acknowledges the importance of our local economy with investments in numerous placemaking strategies to support our local traders. Another important feature of the 2022-23 budget centres on our responsibility to environmental sustainability. $4.26 million is allocated to a range of environmental initiatives to continue to minimise Council's impact on the environment and work towards a healthier, more sustainable future for our city. We maintain our commitment to vital community services across Borondara, including libraries, health and wellbeing, family, youth, active ageing and recreation. Services such as these are fundamental as we continue to emerge from this difficult period. We will also continue our investment in several transformation projects to ensure the community have increased choice and convenience every time they interact with Council. We have a busy, challenging and exciting year ahead. Thank you once again to those who provided their feedback. With you, all of us at Council are working to maintain our high standards of services and facilities while also building a better and brighter future for Borondara. Thank you. And I'll now see if anyone has any questions for officers. Thank you, councillors. No? Thank you. Councillor Franco, you do?
Yes, thank you. A question just in relation to...
Councillor Hollingsworth, sorry.
Thank you. In relation to transforming Burundara, could officers say how much is in the current the 2023 financial year and in future years in the long-term budget?
Thank you for the question. And 21 million is included for this current year, and we'll have to get back to you with regards to the next year.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question with regard to page 2 of the report under the heading Key Issues, where it has 3 dot points that include Kew Recreation Centre, Tuckstand refurbishment and library redevelopment of Kew. Just wanted to ask where it mentions Tuckstand refurbishment of the 17.2 million over a 4-year period. It has that it's to be completed by 24-25, and I was just wondering if that may be bringing it forward 12 months or 2 years, whether it was a typo that we may need to rectify.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm sure we'd like to bring all of our projects forward if it was feasible to do so, but I just thought we might need to clarify that one. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just...
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, those dates are accurate. That's the Tuckstand is proposed to start in the 2022-23 year with completion in 24-25.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I have no questions, but I'm happy to move a motion when the time's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I can't see... Oh, Councillor Franco, you've got another
Yes, thank
question.
you. In relation to the Tuckstand, is there any consideration of or is any of the funding to go to the sporting facilities that the sporting pavilion adjoins, or is it all for the building?
I think our CEOs.
I wonder if I could just confirm with the Councillor Franco speaking to the weightlifting centre beside the Tuckstand or to the Ferguson stand beside the weightlifting centre beside the Tuckstand?
Or a third option I would have said yes. So look, I was actually referring to the, look, I'll rephrase it. Specifically, it's worth answering in relation to the powerlifting, if that's the correct term, weightlifting centre, and separately, probably more importantly in my mind, the sporting field that's adjacent. And in relation to that, is there opportunity to give consideration to uses of the Tuckstand that would complement and work with the sporting fields that are adjacent?
Yes. I won't mention the weightlifting centre has already been the subject of some refurbishment, so it has already been upgraded, if you like. The intention with regard to the Ferguson stand beside that is to demolish that facility to implement the master plan, which would convert that site into open space and links through to Grace Park. With regard to the Tuckstand itself, they are decisions that you will make as a group. Work is currently being done to bring to you sufficient information for you to be able to make judgments about how to utilise the Tuckstand. It would, however, make a lot of sense to use that facility to obviously get the best out of the Glenferrie Oval playing surface.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I can't see any other lights on, so Councillor Thompson, you foreshadowed a motion.
That is the officer's recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Franco?
No, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
Assuming it gets seconded.
Yeah. Councillor... Sorry, let's just see what the amendment is then.
Well, should we wait until it's seconded? At the end of point 1, where the dot point is, comma, instead of a full stop, subject to a 50% reduction in the overall proposed expenditure for the Transforming Boroondara project. Full stop. I don't expect the mover to agree with my amendment.
That is correct, Councillor Franco.
So do we have a seconder for the... Sorry, Councillor... Mr. Storer wants to speak to it, I think.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wish to ensure councillors understand the implications of what it is Councillor Franco has suggested. The funds which are proposed in this budget are proposed on the basis that this council has approved contracts which have been signed and are being actioned. So if those funds are not proceeded with, council will be in breach of its contractual obligations. And that brings with it both serious financial and reputational impacts, which councillors just need to be aware of when you are considering that proposition.
Just a question in respect of that. What's the quantum of the commitment versus the budgetary allocation?
Perhaps I wonder if I could ask for Mr Bassi just to comment on the question in relation to the contracts and the sum of money in the budget.
So some of the commitments, Councillor Park, include the 18.5 million that was agreed for the core systems implementation. We have some contracted commitments towards our resourcing, which is internal, circa about $4 million a year for the next 2 years. I would have to speak to the team and take on notice the remainder of the question. There is some contingents in there of about $2 million, but the majority of it is either forecasted or committed.
Sorry, Councillor Park.
I'm willing to second an amended version of Councillor Franco's amendment, which would specify a reduction to the maximum extent possible, taking into account existing contractual obligations.
Councillor Franco.
I'd be happy with that, yes.
So I think we need to pause and get some words.
Madam Mayor, obviously I've put on table a motion. I'd be in search of a seconder, and I think we can debate it out.
Okay, let's do it that way. So, Councillor Stavro?
Happy to second Councillor Thompson's motion.
All right. So we do have some people opposed. Councillor Park, you've got a question?
I don't have a question, but I'm curious how you would propose to proceed, because in my view, Councillor Franco would be the next speaker.
We have a motion moved and seconded, and then Councillor Franco is seeking to amend it?
That's right.
So he needs to move an amendment. He needs to move an amendment.
Yes. So we need to move an amendment. Yeah. So we're seeking some words, I think. Sorry, some words for us to consider.
Well, I thought they were given, were they not?
Some words on the screen for us to consider, I think, because it's a bit unclear.
That's the answer to the question. What's proposed in this budget?
I think the easiest way to amendment is to search for adjournment to get some text.
It's been suggested that we have a brief adjournment while we... Councillor Park, are you happy to move an adjournment? And seconded Councillor Sinfield?
Happy to.
Nobody, I'm assuming nobody's opposed? Okay, so we'll briefly adjourn. So I'm seeking a motion to resume the meeting. Councillor Thompson, seconded Councillor Biggar. Thank you. I'm assuming nobody's opposed. Thank you. So I think we're about to have a motion up on the screen, an amended motion. And if I could check Councillor Franco as the mover and Councillor Park as the seconder, if that's what you had in mind.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now, is anyone opposed to that motion?
Madam Mayor, can I just seek clarification, please?
Yes.
Through you to the CEO, just on the basis of that motion, can council actually adopt a budget with an indeterminate figure?
My view is that council cannot do that because we're uncertain as to what it is you're actually adopting. So I think that this proposition does pose a real problem in terms of our ability to adopt a motion which is clear as to what it is council is committing to. There is another means by which councillors could achieve a similar objective if they wished, and that would be post the adoption of the budget for councillors to seek a further report in relation to transforming Boroondara to understand what, if anything, of the material which is currently in the budget, if it's adopted in this form, that is the form officers have recommended, could then be changed at a later time. So the same information could be sought at that point, and councillors could make a decision at a subsequent stage to not proceed with some aspects of that. So adopting the budget doesn't prevent you from subsequently taking a different view about some aspects of it. But at this stage, the short answer to your question is I believe that as it's proposed, that is not able to be adopted as a budget.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Park, did you have a question?
I do, yes. If the CEO's got such a concern, then perhaps officers can simply go away and answer the question that was asked earlier. That is, precisely what amount is contractually committed in the forthcoming budget? It's not rocket science, surely?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if we had known that this was the desire of councillors, we perhaps could have come along with the analysis to help you with regard to that. I think that what we're really putting to you this evening is that most of the budget allocation is for matters which are contractually committed, and indeed, if they are not the direct part of the contract, they are required to implement the contract. So, for example, if you were to access one of those contracts, which is for the provision of our core systems, what you will find is that there are resources required in our organisation to support the implementation of that. So the two go hand in hand. You can't actually sensibly separate those two things. If you do that, you're not going to be able to actually capitalise on the contractual commitments which are being funded. So my top-of-head response, without sitting down and doing a detailed analysis, is that the vast majority, if not all the funds in this budget, are connected to the contracts which have been approved by council. That's the best answer I can give you. If you want the information broken down differently, as I said, there is plenty of opportunity for that to be obtained and for council to take a different view at a later time. But tonight you need to adopt the budget where there is absolute clarity about what it is you are adopting.
Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the Councillor Thompson, did you have another clarification?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I know this has happened a number of times. Could that be actually split into two? Through you to the officers or to the CEO? The motion.
Could I ask what you're suggesting? I don't quite follow which part.
Well, following up on what you've suggested, Mr. Storer, that the budget should be adopted in some form tonight and that a future discussion might ensue with regards to transforming Boroondara. Is that actually two motions?
What you could do is adopt it as proposed, but add an additional motion, which is that officers bring back a further report breaking down the contractual commitments from the balance of the funds allocated for further consideration by council.
Okay, thank you. So I think we need to go ahead with where we are, maybe. We do have people, I'm assuming, who are against this motion based on the looks. Councillor Franco, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. First, I'll just start by making a note about the questions that Councillor Thompson asked and that the CEO answered. The amount of funding is an exactly determinate amount, the maximum extent possible, honouring existing contractual obligations. The fact that the figure is not being presented to us by council management in the council chamber here today doesn't in any way diminish that it's an exact amount. Now, in relation to the Transforming Boroondara project, I've expressed my misgivings about the scale, scope, expenditure related to this project prior to being elected as a councillor. And when I stood for election, and since having been here, I continue to have reservations about the scale and nature of the project. I do consider that improvements to the way we deal with our residents and the efficiency and effectiveness of our processes and some of the electronic processes that we're establishing are very positive. But I do have some fundamental reservations about the scale of the project, and I've always been forthright in expressing those views, I think, and they go back to my election as a councillor here. By presenting this motion, I acknowledge that many councillors are supportive of the existing project, but I think there is potential scope to find further savings within the framework of what we have entered into contractually, and I'd like to see those opportunities saved. I mean, the council budget is something that we put together as a collective entity, and it reflects the collective values of all 11 councillors that are elected here, and individually we all may have different bits and pieces, issues that we all would like to see, but it's a collective reflection of the overall views. For me, the budget is something that I would rather see some of the funds that are going into Transforming Boroondara, previously known as Customer First, going into other initiatives that reflect different values and different expressions of views in the community. I'll leave it at that for the purpose of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park is the seconder. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? So I'll go back to you, Councillor Franco, to close.
Oh, well, if no one else is speaking, then that's a different matter. I endorse the comments by Councillor Franco, and I have had grave misgivings about the quantum of ratepayers' funds allocated to this project from day one. So much so that in 2018, I think it was, as Mayor at the time, I called a special meeting for us to discuss that as a council. Unfortunately, all but one councillor couldn't find their way to attend this special meeting. So Councillor Sinfield and I sat with the then Manager of Governance for the requisite half hour waiting for attendance, but alas, there was none. So the appetite for scrutiny of this project has never been strong. I thought perhaps that might change when the Greens campaigned so heavily during the most recent election campaign about the incredible expense of this project, and both in my ward and of course Glenferrie. So Councillor Galt expressed all sorts of misgivings about the project and the expense. So I look forward to his support tonight. The fact is that, as Councillor Franco has suggested, there is a certain sum. It just isn't available to us at this minute, but that doesn't in any way affect the certainty of the budget that would be adopted tonight with the amendment, with the motion as amended that's before you. So there's no good reason whatsoever to vote against this motion, and I have to say that somewhere we have to draw a line in the sand and say we have spent way too much on a project that simply isn't delivering value for money.
Thank you. I can't see any other lights on, so I'll return to Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not the only councillor that campaigned on this issue. The Greens campaigned very strongly opposing expenditure on transforming Boroondara, and I look forward, I hope, to Wes's, Councillor Gold's support, and all councillors who've expressed concerns. I think it's important to try and realise some of the savings that we can. I think Councillor Park has expressed the views and the concerns very eloquently. And look, I urge you to support the motion and note that it is a very definite amount that's identified there, even if it's done through language rather than an exact number figure being presented.
Thank you. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against?
Okay.
So that
I'll call a division. Thanks.
So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Park and Councillor Franco. Thank you. And those against? Thank you. That's Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Gold, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Bigger and Councillor Addis. Thank you. So we'll now go back to Councillor Thompson's motion.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, which I believe was the officer recommendation.
Thank you. And I don't think we got a seconder.
We did.
We did. Councillor Stavrou. Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, was anyone opposed to that? There's nobody opposed, so I'll return to the mover, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our officers who've diligently worked with councillors over the last 6 months in preparation for this budget. To that end, we put this out for consultation to our community approximately 6 weeks ago, to the vast interest that our community's expressed in this budget, both the good and the indifferent, and we've received a lot of feedback, and we've gone through those, which has actually amended this budget for the interests of our community. This budget obviously covers some wonderful projects which are currently in train, including the completion of what will be a fantastic facility at the Kew Recreation Centre. It also signals a number of new projects which are projects that have sort of been sitting on the books for a number of years that we need to really start to tackle for the interests of our community, namely the tuck stand and the Kew Library redevelopment. It's not all the big projects, it's a number of little incidental ones, you know, with regards to the 3 additional items, the 4 additional items that were included, such as the Hartwell Community Resilience Wall, which is part of beautification of the Hartwell shopping precinct, even down to simple things such as the security cameras at the Craig Family Centre. They're small in many respects, but this is a budget that has had lots of deliberation. In fact, the deliberation on this budget actually commenced when I was Mayor, Madam Mayor, towards the end of my term last year, where councillors have spent probably in the order of 7 months. And in doing so, I can understand why councillors have difference of opinions with regards to the budget. It shows the extent to which we've deliberated on this for many, many months, particularly in an uncertain time and coming out of COVID, which has actually impacted council's finances. I'm very happy to move this budget because it actually does balance a number of things economically, and every cent goes towards the betterment of our community for our ratepayers. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Stavrou, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'll be supporting the motion put before us, but I do want to acknowledge Councillor Franco and Councillor Park's comments, and obviously as councillors we do endeavour to apply great scrutiny to all items on the budget, and we do have budget review coming in months ahead. There is the October budget review, and I'd welcome an opportunity to further discuss some of the matters raised here this evening. But for tonight, I'm happy to support the budget before us, and just wanted to acknowledge once again the submissions, presentations and input from our community, in particular reference to neighbourhood character and heritage, parks, gardens and green spaces, and population growth and future planning, and they're all matters that we've given great consideration to in our 7 priority themes, and all of those areas are well catered for in our budget. And I just wanted to close by saying I look forward to seeing the ABS census results, which should be due in the next month or so, to give us an idea of our current demographic and population, and interested to hear the feedback that the census will provide to us. And again, thank the officers for all the work they've done in preparing the budget this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief, but I just felt the need to speak to the point that my endorsement of this budget doesn't mean that I or we are 100% happy with every single component of it. This budget is a negotiated and balanced point that we've reached after months of deliberation and discussion with officers and with councillors, and it's always a great milestone each year to reach this position, and this is what we think collectively is the right thing to do by our community, and continues to deliver some wonderful services and opportunities for our community. Albeit that I add that small disclaimer that there are a few little things here and there about which I have reservations, and I think that generally speaking, this is the right thing to do by our community at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, I'll be brief too, because Councillor Sinfield probably said much of what I was going to say, and that putting out a budget like this, I mean, I feel confident about this budget, and I think getting to a budget is a bit like giving birth, and I think that there's a lot involved in it, and it's a bit difficult, but it's here, and I agree that there's elements of this this budget that were difficult, and that we're not all happy with every aspect of it. But I think there was a lot of hard work and good process involved, and I struggle to sort of upend that at the last minute. I feel that I'm proud of the steps that we're taking towards climate change, with over $4 million on a range of initiatives, which are really important, and action from the community and from council, and I see that as just a beginning of a really important direction for us. And even little things like the increase of number of trees planted from 900 to 1,900 or something. It's a small thing, but it's important. Each one of those steps is really important. And I do also want to just acknowledge those 42 community members who made a submission. I think that's a relatively small number, and I think it's something that many of us are thinking about, is how do we ensure that we really hear the voice of the community in a deliberative and useful way, because it is one of our key roles really as councillors, is to put our ear to the ground and ensure that on something as important as the budget, we are actually hearing what the community thinks about it. So I look forward to more discussions of that for next year. But for this year, I'm happy to give birth to this budget, or to be one of 11 who does so.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I do think Councillor Sinfield's made an excellent point about the way the budget's framed, and that they're correct observations. In relation to the process issues about the budget, which Councillor Biggar has touched on, I think it's really important, looking forward to future budgets, how we engage more effectively and more deliberatively with the community. I think we've been going on a journey in that direction, and it's been positive. I know in this council chamber at the last meeting on the 6th of June, Benjamin Chesler, a Glen Iris resident, spoke eloquently on the issue, and Joy Metham on behalf of Lighter Footprints. I think they both independently came to a very similar conclusion. I was surprised. I thought there had been some collusion in the preparation of what they said, and I asked them independently, and in fact they hadn't colluded or weren't even aware that each other was making a presentation on that topic. So I found it quite thoughtful, and I found that fact that they came to that same point independently quite intriguing, and something that we should take on board. Personally, there's much that I welcome in the budget. I think some of the climate initiatives, of course, and some of the cycling. I personally, it's no surprise that I'd like to see us go much further in terms of cycling and shared paths, but I do welcome what's there. And in terms of, expanding green open space and some of the other initiatives there, and in Hartwell, I know Councillor Thompson touched on the resilience wall, something that the community has been calling on for, and the local traders have been calling on for quite some time. So I do recognise that there's much of merit in the budget. I do have reservations about transforming Boroondara. I've made those clear. I do continue with those reservations, but I appreciate it's a collective decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Galt, your light's now gone off.
I've withdrawn because I think enough has been said. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say something, and then I'll go to Councillor Stavrou, and then back to Councillor Thompson. I think what I want to say is to reflect on the fact that we actually have engaged extensively. It was our community plan that did guide us in many things, and throughout the discussions and decisions, I do recall us going back to the community plan and trying to remind ourselves what it did say. So it's really just to reassure the community that your thoughts are in our minds when we go through this process. And I know a number of you have thanked the officers, and again I wanted to sincerely thank them for going on this really rather stressful journey with us. It's been months of hard work, and it hasn't been easy. Of course we don't all agree. That's why we have 11 people to try and get a consensus, and I think we've worked hard and have got to a consensus that a few people said perhaps we can be proud of it, and I think we can because we worked really hard. So I'll go back to Councillor Stavrou. You reserved your right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's not a lot to say because my colleagues have eloquently said so much, and I'd like to echo a lot of the positive comments, say from Councillor Biggar's giving birth, because I can't possibly echo that one. But I'll go back to Councillor Sinfield's comment about the negotiated outcome. Look, somebody said that if you leave a negotiation and you're not happy at the end when you finalise that, it's probably a good negotiation. And I think that's the key thing about this budget. What I can say is that Councillor Parks and Councillor Franco's comments probably reflect the amount of vigour and debate that has been put behind the scenes. And I think notwithstanding some disagreements, we have to honour the due diligence that have been put by councillors to this budget, the amount of work that's gone into it, and the reflective other side that our officers have put an enormous amount of work in this, which everybody said. I think we've reached a budget which captures from female participation in sport to Indigenous affairs to climate change. So I think we've captured so much in this budget and we should be proud of it. And I'll leave it at that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks to all councillors who've spoken this evening. And just picking up on what Councillor Stavrou's said, there is definitely, there has been a lot of considered responses and discussions amongst colleagues, and that's just reflective of a good council doing good governance in the interests of our community. So that a little bit of debate in that end's not unhealthy because it is actually a good budget. And there is actually something in here for everyone in our community. We're tackling the big things that are really important that need to be tackled, including climate change, bicycle strategies. They're all reflective of a new council with fresh eyes for our community. It has come with challenge, as been noted, but it is something that is worthy of a budget to be passed for our community. There are obviously some future discussions, as acknowledged by Councillor Franco, with young Mr Benjamin Chesler, who presented about the consultation. Lovely young man, a future leader of our community in his own right, about how we consult on future stages of budgets, whether it's on the LTFS or some other form. Those discussions are still continuing amongst ourselves. I certainly look forward to this budget being adopted tonight, recognising that there will always be future discussions and things that come up from time to time. So thank you, councillors, for your support.
Thank you, and we'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you to the officers. Our next item is general business, and I believe you have a conflict, Councillor Gillies, in terms of leave of absence. So we'll come and get you in a moment. So we have a request from Councillor Gillies for leave 10th of July to 23rd of July. Is somebody prepared to... Yes, Councillor Hollingsworth, and seconded Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you.
Anyone opposed?
I'm surprised there's no debate, Madam Mayor, but I'm happy to support this.
I think we've had enough of that tonight. Yes. Okay, so nobody opposed, I'm assuming. Those in favour? Yes, thank you. So that's carried unanimously. No divisions needed. Thank you. So we'll get Councillor Gillies back. Councillors, are there any other items of general business? Thank you. No. Urgent business? No. Confidential business? Thank you. No. So that does bring us to the end of council business for this evening, and thank you to all of those who have joined us, and we wish you and your family well and particularly good health in these still troubling times. And I declare the council meeting closed at 8:45. Thank you very much, everyone.